February 26th, 1991. Night falls over the Iraqi-Kuwaiti desert, but calling it night feels generous. There is no sky anymore, no horizon, just a wall of sand, swallowing everything that dares to exist in front of it. A shamel has rolled in violent howling, merciless. Wind screams across the flats at nearly 60 miles per hour, dragging sand like shrapnel across steel. Visibility collapses to less than 50 meters. To the naked eye, the world ends somewhere around your fingertips. This is the kind of weather where wars politely wait. At least that's how the manuals describe it. Aircraft are grounded. Helicopters are useless. Lasers scatter into nothing. Even seasoned night optics are supposed to choke in dust this thick. According to every lesson written since the Second World War, this is a pause, a timeout. Nature has called a ceasefire. Inside the dug-in positions of the Iraqi Republican Guard, that belief feels reassuring. These are not frightened conscripts. These are the elite. Saddam's steel fist. Men who survived 8 grinding years against Iran and lived to tell the story usually loudly and preferably over tea. Their T-72 tanks sit buried hull down in the sand, turrets, low fields of fire mapped perfectly. This is textbook defense. This is how you kill an armored advance. The Soviet doctrine they trust is beautifully simple. If you cannot see the enemy cannot see you. And tonight, no one can see anything. The sandstorm is thick enough to make even God squint. The Americans, according to intelligence reports, are somewhere out there, miles away. Blind, cautious, probably regretting their life choices. The Iraqi commanders check their maps again. Minefields are laid. Scouts are positioned. The terrain is familiar. The storm is a gift. The desert itself has joined their side. All they have to do is wait. And waiting, it turns out, is something soldiers are very good at. Engines idle. Radios murmur quietly. Crews sit in steel coffins that feel safe, even cozy, in a grim military sort of way. There is confidence here. Not bravado, but certainty. The calm that comes from believing the rules still apply. After all, tanks don't move fast in zero visibility. Guns don't hit what gunners can't see. Wars don't happen inside sandstorms, not real ones. The irony, of course, is that every assumption being made in this moment is wrong. Not exaggerated, not slightly outdated, completely wrong. But no one inside those turrets knows that yet. As far as the Republican Guard is concerned, this night belongs to them. The storm is their shield. The doctrine is their armor. The enemy is blind, distant, and obedient to the same physical laws. For now, the desert is quiet if you ignore the screaming wind and the sand trying to peel paint off metal. The kind of quiet that feels earned. The kind that convinces men they are in control. And that is exactly what makes what comes next so devastating. The first tank dies without drama. No warning. No sound that announces itself as important. 1 second, it exists a familiar shape crouched in the sand. The next, it doesn't. There is no flash cutting through the storm, no roar echoing across the desert. Just a violent, sudden absence where 40 tons of steel used to be. For a brief moment, no one reacts. Radios stay quiet, as if the network itself needs a second to process what just happened. Then voices overlap all at once. Confusion pours through the static. Someone shouts that it must have been a mine. Another insists it was artillery. A third swears he saw nothing at all, which is not a very comforting report under the circumstances. The commander grips his periscope and leans in closer, as if proximity might help. Outside, the sandstorm rages exactly as it did a second ago. No new noise, no engine, no movement. According to everything he knows, nothing out there should be capable of doing that. Then the second tank goes, this time closer. Close enough that the shockwave thumps against nearby hulls like a giant knocking on a steel door. Again, no flash, No visible source, just destruction appearing out of nowhere, like reality briefly malfunctioned. That's when panic stops being theoretical. Turrets begin to traverse wildly motors, whining as gunners swing their barrels left and right, stabbing blindly into the brown void. Eyes search for muzzle flashes that never come. Every tank crew knows what a gun looks like when it fires at night. Even modern cannons spit flame. They betray themselves. That's the rule. Except there is nothing to betray here. The radio network dissolves into noise. Voices talk over each other, demanding bearings ranges anything. Nobody has answers. Someone keeps repeating front, which would be helpful if anyone could define where front actually is in a sandstorm that erased all direction. A third explosion punches through the line, then a fourth. The spacing is wrong. The timing is wrong. This isn't a barrage. It's not suppressive fire. It's deliberate, patient, almost polite. The crews begin to realize something deeply unsettling. This doesn't feel like being attacked. It feels like being selected. They aren't trading fire. They aren't fighting an enemy they can locate or even imagine properly. They are being removed one by one from a battlefield they can no longer perceive. The storm hasn't hidden the attacker. It has erased the idea that the attacker needs to be seen at all. Somewhere in the chaos, a gunner laughs nervously and says, maybe the Americans found a way to shoot through sand. Someone else tells him to shut up. Physics still exists after all, or at least it's supposed to. But physics is not offering much comfort tonight. Tanks continue to vanish. Crews shout orders that lead nowhere. The doctrine that promised safety and blindness is collapsing in real time. And the most terrifying part is not the explosions. It's the silence between them. The gaps where nothing happens, where everyone waits for the next tank to simply stop existing. Whatever is out there isn't rushing. It isn't guessing. It isn't reacting. It's watching. At some point, training takes over. Panic is loud, but doctrine is louder. Inside the remaining Iraqi tanks, hands move almost automatically. Switches flip. Orders repeat themselves through clenched teeth. If you can't see, you make yourself see. That's what they were taught. One by one, the infrared searchlights come alive. Mounted beside the main gun, the Luna system blooms into action, projecting invisible infrared light forward into the storm. To the naked eye, nothing changes, but inside the scopes, the world turns grainy green. Shapes appear. Dunes, wreckage, shadows. For a brief, dangerous moment, relief washes through the crews. They can see again. Or at least they think they can. What they don't realize is that the sandstorm is laughing at them. The infrared beams slam into billions of airborne particles and scatter straight back into the optics. The effect is instant, like turning on high beams in thick fog. The more power they add, the blinder they become. Targets dissolve into shimmering noise. Depth disappears. Distance lies. They are staring into their own headlights. Worse still, those lights aren't just illumination. They're announcements. To anything out there watching in a different spectrum, each Luna system is a glowing beacon screaming, "Here I am." Shoot me. The radios erupt again. Orders to fire, to suppress, to do something. High explosive rounds thunder into the storm, detonating blindly, tearing up sand that was already angry enough. The explosions look impressive. They accomplish nothing. There is no infantry to pin down, no visible armor to disrupt. Just empty desert absorbing the violence without complaint. Then the reports start coming in from the rear, confused, panicked, almost embarrassed. Units claim they're being hit from over 2,000 meters away. They insist the enemy tanks are moving at speed while firing accurately. To the Soviet-trained analysts listening to this chaos, the reports sound like hysteria. Tanks don't do that. not according to the rules, not off-road, not in zero visibility. Someone mutters that it's impossible. Someone else says the laws of optics don't allow it. A third wonders if the Americans have invented a new missile or radar-guided gun or something that belongs in a science fiction novel rather than a battlefield manual. Up front, the Iraqi crews don't have time for theories. They feel the pattern changing. The explosions aren't random anymore. They're rhythmic, closing. The intervals between impacts are shrinking. That realization lands like a punch to the chest. The enemy isn't stopping to fire. In every exercise they've ever run, accurate tank fire requires a halt. Brake, stabilize, aim, shoot. That's the process. That's the rhythm burned into muscle memory. But whatever is killing them is ignoring that rhythm entirely. It's moving, and it's shooting while it moves. The idea alone is enough to break morale. The crews shout into their headsets, warning each other, warning anyone still listening. They're hunting us. Someone yells. Not attacking? Hunting. Another tank dies. This one doesn't explode theatrically. It just jerks shutters and goes quiet. Inside, the crew never hears the shot. They never feel the impact. They simply cease to exist in the space of a heartbeat. The silence afterward is worse than the noise. By now, Doctrine isn't providing comfort. It's actively betraying them. Every step they take according to the book makes things worse. The lights reveal them. The fire draws attention. The formations turn into target lists. Somewhere, someone laughs bitterly and says the manuals never mentioned this part. No one argues. Control slips away piece by piece. Orders arrive too late. Coordinates mean nothing. Direction has lost meaning. The storm, once an ally, now feels like a closed room with no doors. The terrifying truth is settling in. They are not fighting a superior tank. They are fighting a superior way of seeing, and the rules they trusted are helping the enemy more than they're helping them survive. At some point, staying still becomes more dangerous than moving. The Iraqi commanders feel it before they say it out loud. Dug in, blind, lit up by their own equipment, they are being erased where they stand. Whatever is hunting them prefers stationary targets. That leaves only one option that doesn't involve waiting politely to die. Engines roar to life across the line. The order is simple and terrifying. Move, break cover, get out of the berms, close the distance, less than 800 meters. Knife fight range. Close enough that optics matter less and instinct matters more. It's a gamble built on desperation, the kind of decision officers make when every other page of the manual has already failed. Tracks churn the sand as the remaining T-72s lurch forward into the storm. The formations dissolve immediately. Visibility is still almost zero. Drivers strain to follow vague shapes and engine noise. Gunners fight their own sights, trying to force clarity out of systems that were never meant for this chaos. The laser rangefinders flicker and lie. Beams scatter in the dust, returning false distances. Computers whisper numbers that mean nothing. Targets appear closer than they are, then farther, then vanish entirely. The gunners fire anyway. The first Iraqi tank shoots on the move, its gun bucking hard. The crew waits for an impact they never see. Miss. Another tank fires. Miss. A third shell screams into the storm and disappears like a bad idea. For a brief, irrational moment, someone feels hope. They fired first. They advanced. They did what aggressive armor is supposed to do. Maybe this breaks the spell. It doesn't. The response is immediate and merciless. A depleted uranium penetrator slashes through the darkness and strikes one of the charging tanks head-on. There's no explosion worthy of the moment, no fireball, just a violent shudder as physics does something deeply personal to the armor. The round punches through steel like it was tired of pretending this was a contest. The tank collapses into silence before its crew can react. Another Iraqi tank takes a hit seconds later. One shot. One kill. No adjustment fire. No ranging. Just precision. The realization spreads faster than the shockwaves. Shooting first doesn't help. Moving doesn't help. Closing the distance doesn't help. Whatever rules governed tank combat yesterday have been revoked without notice. The remaining crews push forward anyway, because turning back feels worse. The storm swallows them engines, screaming orders, overlapping cohesion gone. Tanks weave around burning wrecks that were alive moments ago. The battlefield has turned into a maze of smoking corpses and blind momentum. Then it happens again. A tank in the lead platoon jerks, violently slows, and stops. No secondary explosion. No heroic last stand. Just absence. The crew inside never knows what hit them. Panic finally overwhelms discipline. Some tanks accelerate blindly. Others hesitate. A few try to reverse and nearly collide with their own comrades. The charge has become a stampede, and stampedes don't require enemies to be deadly. By now, the Iraqi crews understand the truth they didn't want to admit. This isn't a duel. It isn't even a fight. It's a demonstration. The enemy sees them, tracks them, measures them, and kills them at will. Firing first, charging hard following Doctrine, none of it changes the outcome. There are no rules left. No safe range. No correct response. Only movement noise, heat, and a hunter that never seems surprised. There is one belief left. One rule that has never failed them before. Concealment. If you can't beat the enemy, you disappear from him. It is the oldest survival reflex in armored warfare, older than any doctrine, older than any manual. Hide. Go quiet. Let the storm do the rest. The order cuts through the chaos. Pop smoke. Kill engines. Reverse into cover. White phosphorus canisters burst into life along the line, vomiting thick clouds that bloom instantly in the wind. The desert vanishes behind a wall of rolling white. This smoke is designed for moments like this. It blinds the human eye. It scatters lasers. It erases shapes. Combined with the sandstorm, visibility drops below zero. According to everything they know, this should be perfect invisibility. Inside the Iraqi tanks, engines are shut down. The roar fades. The crews sit still listening. The battlefield goes strangely quiet. No advancing tracks. No gunfire. Just wind and swirling sand. For the first time in minutes, no one is dying. A breath of relief slips in. Small, careful, almost guilty. Somewhere inside a turret, a crewman mutters that maybe this finally worked. Someone else tells him not to say it out loud. They wait, convinced that if the Americans exist at all, they'll roll straight past blind and clueless, and the ambush will flip the script. 200 meters away, an M1A1 Abrams slows to a stop. From the outside, it looks blind. No lights, no beams, no drama. Just a low silhouette gliding through the storm like it belongs there. Inside, the gunner is not staring into smoke. He's not fighting sand. He's not looking for shapes or shadows. He's looking at heat. To the thermal sight, the smoke doesn't exist. Phosphorus is cool. Sand is cool. The storm is just background noise. What matters is the contrast. And the Iraqi tanks are glowing. Engines that were shut down minutes ago still radiate warmth. Tracks hot from movement burn bright against the cold ground. Gun barrels warmed by earlier shots stand out like neon tubes. Even exhaust vents paint clear signatures in the darkness. On the screen, the smoke doesn't hide anything. It frames it. The Iraqi crews believe they are invisible. On the Abrams display, they look like targets outlined in white. The gunner barely adjusts. The computer does the rest, calculating lead and alignment without emotion. At 200 meters, there is no guesswork, no uncertainty, no need for speed. Fire. The depleted uranium penetrator crosses the distance faster than sound. Inside the Iraqi tank, there is no warning, no roar, no impact they can react to. The round punches through the side armor, turning steel briefly liquid, spraying fragments into the crew compartment. The tank dies without noise, without spectacle. It simply stops. The pattern repeats. Smoke everywhere. Targets everywhere. The concealment that was supposed to save them has become a high-contrast backdrop. The more they hide, the clearer they appear. Inside the remaining Iraqi tanks, understanding arrives slowly, and then all at once. The smoke didn't blind the enemy. It blinded only them. The sandstorm wasn't protection. It was cover for the hunter. This is the moment when hope finally breaks. Not with panic, but with certainty. There is nothing left to try. No tactic waiting in reserve. No clever trick to spring. The battlefield has turned into a quiet execution. One white outline after another fades from the screen. The last belief, the oldest one, is gone. They are not hidden. They are illuminated. At some point, the battlefield stops being mysterious. Not because the killing slows down, but because the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Whatever is out there isn't supernatural. It isn't luck. And it isn't bravery. It's something far more uncomfortable for anyone who trusted the old rules. It's physics. For decades, night fighting meant one thing: image intensification. You take what little light exists, the moon, stars, distant fires, and you amplify it. Turn darkness into grainy green visibility. It works well enough as long as light can travel, as long as smoke is thin, as long as dust stays where dust belongs. The Soviets were masters of this approach. Their tanks were built around it. Their doctrine assumed it. If the battlefield went dark, they would simply amplify the darkness. If visibility dropped, everyone suffered equally. Fair fight. That assumption was the mistake. The Americans didn't try to see better light. They stopped looking for light entirely. Thermal imaging doesn't care about brightness. It doesn't care about shadows. It doesn't even care if it's day or night. It looks for heat. Anything above absolute zero emits energy. The hotter it is, the louder it glows. This is where the sandstorm stops being an obstacle and starts becoming irrelevant. Visible light travels in short wavelengths, roughly the same size as the sand particles filling the air that night. That's why the storm blocks vision so completely. Light slams into dust and scatters. Nothing gets through. Long-wave infrared is different. Its wavelengths are much larger than those particles. So instead of crashing into the storm, it flows around it. To a thermal sensor, the sandstorm isn't opaque, it's transparent. While Iraqi gunners stared into a wall of nothing, American gunners were watching clean, high-contrast images. Black background, white targets. No ambiguity. And those targets were impossible to hide. A tank is a furnace. Engines radiate heat long after they shut down. Tracks glow from friction. Gun barrels stay warm after firing. Even exhaust vents leave signatures that linger in the air. You can turn off your lights. You can cut your engine. You can bury yourself in sand. But you can't turn off physics. This is why the infrared searchlights became such a gift to the enemy. The Luna system was designed for a different war. In the 1960s, active infrared made sense. You shine invisible light, see what reflects, and stay hidden from the naked eye. Against image intensifiers, it worked. Against thermal sights, it was suicide. When Iraqi crews flipped those switches, they weren't just illuminating the battlefield. They were lighting flares, massive, unmistakable signals broadcasting their exact position. On American thermal displays, those lights didn't appear faint. They exploded into brilliance. The enemy didn't have to search. The targets volunteered. Inside the Abrams, the advantage wasn't armor thickness or gun caliber. It was time. Seeing first means deciding first. Deciding first means shooting first. and shooting first at modern tank ranges usually means shooting last. The heart of this advantage sat quietly inside the gunner's station, a cooled thermal sensor sensitive enough to detect temperature differences smaller than a human breath. While Iraqi crews argued with their optics, the Abrams system measured reality directly. No guesswork, no interpretation. This is why the battle felt unfair. Because it was. Not in a moral sense, but in a physical one. One side was fighting with eyes. The other was fighting with sensors. One side was bound by visibility. The other had escaped it. So no, the Abrams wasn't invincible. It wasn't magical. It wasn't faster or braver in any heroic way. It simply saw the battlefield as it truly was while its enemy was still trying to see it the old way. The ghost in the sand wasn't a weapon. It was awareness. When the firing finally stops, the silence feels heavier than the battle. Not because the desert has grown peaceful, but because there is nothing left to interrupt it. The storm still howls. The sand still moves. But the Republican Guard is gone. The numbers tell the story with a cruelty words struggle to match. Entire Iraqi armored formations destroyed in less than 23 minutes of actual engagement. Dozens of tanks erased before they ever understood what was killing them. And on the other side, the number that matters most is not impressive because it is large, but because it is zero. No M1 Abrams destroyed by enemy tank fire. Not one. When these reports begin circulating beyond the desert, disbelief spreads faster than the facts. In Moscow, analysts stare at the data, then check it again, assuming there must be a mistake. There isn't. They are not watching an ally lose a battle. They are watching a theory collapse. For decades, the balance of armored warfare rested on simple assumptions. Thicker armor meant survival. Bigger guns meant dominance. More tanks meant victory. Flood the battlefield with steel-absorb losses overwhelmed the enemy. It was brutal, expensive, and terrifying, but it was predictable. That predictability died in the sand. The Iraqi tanks were not weak. They were not poorly built. They were not cowardly. They were simply blind. And blindness, it turns out, is fatal, no matter how thick your armor is. This is the moment where quantity stops mattering, where protection becomes irrelevant, where courage has no audience because no one sees it. The battlefield doesn't reward strength anymore. It rewards awareness. If you can't see the enemy, you are not a soldier. You are a target. That sentence sounds dramatic, but it is brutally literal. The Abrams didn't win because it was invincible. It won because it understood the battlefield before the battlefield understood itself. It saw first, it decided first. And in modern war, that sequence is everything. This is why some historians quietly mark this night as the true end of the Cold War. Not because flags changed or speeches were made, but because an entire military philosophy was exposed as obsolete in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom. No nuclear weapons were fired, no cities were leveled, no superpower surrendered. And yet the result was unmistakable. Tens of thousands of tanks designed around visibility optics and mass became relics overnight. Steel was no longer armor. Information was. The ghost that haunted the desert that night wasn't American firepower. It wasn't superior bravery or better training. It was a sensor, a way of seeing that made everything else irrelevant. And once that truth emerged, there was no going back. Armies could add armor, add guns, add numbers, but without awareness they would simply add targets. The desert didn't witness a battle, it witnessed a lesson.